Earlier this week at the Concord Speedway in North Carolina, the C.C. Welliver Busch Series team gave Bill Lester the opportunity to test the team's number 66 car. Lester made his NASCAR Busch Series debut earlier this year at Watkins Glen, and now he's looking for a full-time ride.
I've always loved cars since I was a little kid. I think probably the biggest exposure to racing itself, though, was my father took me to a Can-Am race at Laguna Seca back in the late 60s.
Bill Lester is one of only a handful of black drivers who are starting to get attention in racing, attention that is long overdue.
I tried SCCA club racing. That went well, won Rookie of the Year. Then the next year won the Northern California Road Racing Championship, and then kept on trying to climb the ladder professionally.
It has been a steady climb up the ladder for Lester. Now he has his sights set on the top rung.
Been racing since 1985, professionally since 1989. Biggest races have been the 24 Hours of Daytona, SCCA Trans Am Racing, and the Watkins Glen Busch Grand National race earlier this year.
Bill Lester was highly recommended by Bobby Hillen after, racing Bill up at Watkins Glen.
Lester is one of the few minorities who have been able to get a foot in the door, and things appear to be looking up.
People in corporate America who are, by and large, the decision makers that allow a driver to get out on the track just are not familiar with people of color out in racing.
I don't know how much interest minorities have had in the sport, but I think they're in peripheral divisions where they have limited money to participate and probably aren't in the limelight.
Minority interest in racing has started to grow, but it will take time for these young, talented drivers to rise through the ranks and make it to the top levels of racing.
I'm looking for people that can drive a race car, and I don't really care whether they're minority or not.
And you've been racing, being you're 41, it's been about, I'm going to compute here, about 20 years of this trying to get ahead. Did you ever get sidetracked, or did you ever say, well, maybe this isn't going to happen for me?
There's always been that question as to whether or not it would really come to fruition. I mean, there were some lean years there where, for example, between 91 and 96, I didn't race at all. I sat out essentially 5 years from competition. I mean, I made my first professional race in 1989, and I did in a couple of Trans Am races, SEC Trans Am races in 1990, and then I didn't race again until 1996, and I was just bouncing off the walls. I mean, I was like, I got to race, and I got married in between that time, and my wife Cheryl was like, go out there and find out if you still enjoy racing, find out if you're still good at it, and see if you still have been bitten by that bug. And sure enough, I come back in 96, and my first race back, I'm finishing fourth at Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, at a track I'd never been to before. And then the next race after that, I was third at Watkins Glen, New York, again in a track I'd never been to, and I was competitive, I was fast, and that answered, without a doubt that not only was I still good at it, but I loved it. And so, but in between that time, I mean, it was really difficult to just try to continue to keep my nose to the grindstone and try to make the sponsorship calls and the, nurture the relationships that could hopefully bring me to a full-time racing deal.
Right.
And it was basically question. It's like, well, you're thinking about doing something where there's no established success rate and jeopardizing a great career and success at a high-tech company and all that to do what? Go racing? And I was like, well, yeah, because that's what's in my heart. That's what I really wanted to do. That's where I felt that my skills and my gifts were given to me. And it was up to me to realize this dream.
Have you ever had a chance to talk to Willie T. Ribbs about his experiences and find out what he's gone through and use any of that knowledge?
It's funny that you mentioned Willie T. It's ironic because when I went through that racing school I told you about in 1985, and I wound up being the best student in the school, Willie T. Ribbs happened to be at Sears Point when I went through this school. And I don't know why. We never really talked about why he was there at Sears Point, but he was there and he watched me. And he came back into the garage area after I was done on track. He comes up to me and he goes, "I've been watching you." And for me, it's like, wow, Willie T. Ribbs is talking to me. I mean, for me, he was like big as life. He was basically the only African-American driver who was of any note, at that level at that time. And I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. He goes, you can make it in this sport. He goes, you stay in touch with me. And Willie T and I have known each other since '85 and been great friends, and we've been both a sense of support and balance for each other. It's been very difficult for him in his career, in his racing career, as it has been for me in mine. And he and I have basically been pillars of support for each other. We've encouraged each other to continue, not give up, to keep beating the pavement, to realize that this is a difficult thing we're trying to achieve. And hey, it's like almost we had the attitude it's him and I, and we have to continue to make it happen because we know that we're good at it, and we know that we can be successful at it if we're given the right opportunities. And so, yeah, in answer to your question, I mean, he's been one of the big sources of inspiration to me, and without knowing him, who knows, maybe I would have given up, but the fact is, probably not, because I mean, unless every door was closed, unless every opportunity was thrown by the wayside, I probably would have continued against all odds to keep trying to make it happen.
Have you found, and knowing that there's only a couple of African Americans in racing at this point, have you found doors that have just been closed because of your color?
Well, I mean, you never get a direct response that says, you're not what I'm looking for, being the politically correct way maybe to say that, because of your color. Right. But that as a result of some of the excuses or, answers that you get, that there may be some of that coming into play. Now, I'm not on the other side in corporate America in that, boardroom or in that vice president of marketing's office knowing exactly what's going down. But there's been some very interesting situations that occurred, such as I've come and knocked on the door, and for whatever reason, that executive might say, well, this isn't something we're going to go into or whatever. And then maybe a few months later, or maybe as much as a year later, that company decides to get into racing and sponsor a driver. So you can only let your speculation guide you. But I mean,
right.
Yeah, it basically causes me concern and question.
But now you've kind of overcome that a little bit with Dodge, because they're trying to help open some of those doors.
Yeah, I mean, what Dodge Motorsports and the Dodge dealers have done has been tremendous. I can only commend them for the step that they've made. Instead of talking about diversity and opportunities, they basically put their money where their mouth is. And they've created this NASCAR Craftsman Truck program, the number 8 Dodge team that Willie T. Ribbs had the opportunity to race with in 2001, and that I'm fortunate enough to be able to participate with in 2002. And it's a deal where I don't have to bring corporate sponsorship. It's all laid out there. The Dodge dealers are taking a percentage of the money that they sell from each one of their vehicles and putting into this pot, as well as their corporate structure putting money into this deal. Right. And Bobby Hamilton Racing is fortunate enough to be able to provide the truck for me, and I'm fortunate enough to be able to get behind the wheel and steer it. And so I'm really blessed, I'm happy, I'm glad that Dodge has done this, and we're looking for big things to happen.